All right, folks, I love the conversational energy. Maybe we can direct that to our wonderful panelists as we discuss today workplace wellness, rejuvenating mental wealth. I love the way that they framed this, and I am so excited that we are having this conversation. So, hello everyone. I am your moderator today. My name is Diana Chow. I am the founder and executive director of Letters to Strangers, the largest global youth mental health NGO. And I'm excited to be joined here today by three wonderful panelists. I'm going to introduce them a bit real quick. So, first up, we have Vlad, and Vlad is the founder and CEO of Kayan Health. He has more than a decade of experience in organizational health and performance at McKinsey and Company, where he led employee mental health and well-being programs for more than 30,000 people during the height of the pandemic. At Kayan Health, he works closely with senior business leaders and leading academics to bring cutting-edge health and well-being research into the workplace with a mission to make mental well-being a superpower at work. Vlad holds an MBA with distinction from INSEAD and an MSc in economics from HEC Paris. And then next up, we have Krista. Krista is a prominent digital artist and is renowned for her exploration of digital consciousness. As the founder and CEO of ZeroStudio.ai, she is at the forefront of pioneering mental health and wellness initiatives in the metaverse in collaboration with AuraHealth.io. Krista's fascination with digital technology's impact on human perception, social structures, and communication transcends both digital and physical realms. She is here today as a cultural leader at this economic forum and serving as the metaverse editor for Singapore Vogue. And Krista has made significant contributions to the intersection of art and technology. Notably, in 2020, she created Mars House, the first NFT metaverse home, which garnered substantial attention and became the highest grossing NFT sale on Super Rare in March 2021. Krista also initiated the Techism movement in 2014, advocating for technology as an artistic discipline and promoting digital humanism within our digital culture. Her Continuum sound and light installation graced the Times Square on 96 screens every midnight in February of 2022, showcasing her impact on the global stage, and she is acknowledged as the first female NFT artist in the permanent LACMA collection. Finally, we have, last but not least, Prabhu. Prabhu is a dynamic youth changemaker and social entrepreneur based in India, and he boasts a diverse background in social innovation, entrepreneurship, and youth leadership. He's currently leading partnerships at Hackdarshack, an award-winning social enterprise, and he has played a pivotal role in facilitating last-mile access to government welfare programs and financial inclusion for over 4 million citizens in India through technology. Prabhu's leadership extends to various startups focused on CSR, corporate volunteering, and employee engagement. He has also spearheaded the MASH Project Foundation, driving ecosystem building for youth-led social innovation in India and South Asia. Beyond his professional commitments, Prabhu serves as the outgoing curator of the Gurugram Hub of the Global Shapers Community, an initiative here at the World Economic Forum, advocating for dialogue, cooperation, and action for social impact among the global youth network. He's a fervent advocate for mental health and well-being and has led initiatives including a flagship incubation program with the UNDP India, addressing mental health and livelihood challenges for vulnerable communities. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'm so excited for this conversation. So we're gonna have space for Q&A at the end, but I want to start with a question. In what ways can workplace well-being initiatives be designed to ensure inclusivity and effectiveness for a diverse workforce, taking into account the unique needs and perspectives of different age groups within the organization? And how can technology potentially play a role in this? Anyone would like to start? Vlad, I saw you nodding.
No, happy to. So I think the first thing we have to start with is that there is no one-stop shop or one silver bullet solution for mental health. Everyone has mental health, but it's very specific to who we are as individuals. So part of finding the right solution means asking yourself, what do I need? And what do I need at a specific time? And when we work with large companies, we always start with tapping into that innate curiosity of, I want to understand myself better before I commit to a specific solution. So I think it has to start with offering people the chance to build self-awareness first before we start pushing the solution to whatever it is they're dealing with. And this is where I think data can be extremely powerful, because as more of us start asking these questions, start building self-awareness, we also build our collective understanding of what makes people feel good at work, but also what makes them sad and what makes them really struggle when they reach a crisis point. So I think it has to start with self-awareness, because that allows you to personalize the different solutions, be it for age groups, for cultural backgrounds, for gender, for sexual preference. It doesn't really matter, but we have to give people the opportunity to ask those questions.
Mm. And Krista?
Thank you. I believe that mental health has to be a cultural acceptance and a mandate. And I think that it has to start from the top C suite level and the management structures. I think that the managers need to be fully aware and practicing mindfulness for themselves and also be trained in how to become more mindful managers for their employees. Create a very welcoming and peaceful and collaborative, supportive workforce. How do you do that? Let's change the corporate structure from being, tough and working people to the bone. Let's start thinking about the humanity in your employees. And then, of course, when you walk into an office, this is a beautiful space. Beauty inside the workspace has an incredible effect on the mindset and the psychology of the people. Let's create places that are beautiful, inspiring. Let's integrate meditation artwork. Let's create work that actually changes the brain state of the people. What about healing sound frequencies? What about the experiences? Let's create immersive experiences where people can go into a space, they can retreat, they can have a meditation, but also a beautiful experience. Now that's in the physical realm. These are easy things that we can apply. What about the metaverse? The metaverse is also a wonderful opportunity for large companies with thousands of employees to come together for very specific wellness, psychoeducation, training, preventative measures, and then, of course, the therapeutic if it's necessary.
So I think from the perspectives of young people at workplace, I think we have to ask what do young people really want out of a workplace. I think young people want to see trust in the culture. Young people want to see they need agency, and young people want to make sure that there's inclusivity, uh, especially when it comes to neurodivergent talent, right? Now the question is, how do we get there? We all know strategy and solution. I think one of the foremost challenge which I experienced in my own journey was, and I served on a leadership role of a startup which was growing really fast. Was that there was no time or platform for a dialogue across. So we had people from all age groups. I was probably the youngest, but we also had people who were like way older than me. And I realized that I agree with Vlad when he said that self-awareness absolutely missing. We teach a lot, but when it comes to our own selves, we do not really. And I'm speaking on behalf of my own experience. People do not really spend time practicing that mindfulness that Krista was talking about. So for me, I think it's extremely important that how do we ensure that if we have to design, mental wellness programs, strategies, it has to, young people need to have the agency to be involved in that process. That's one. But when it comes to, since you asked about technology, I look at technology from a perspective that technology is an enabler. It's not a replacement. I think what we're missing at our workplaces is human connection. We carry a very different self to office, to our workplace. And we're absolutely, many times when we put off our masks, we realize there's so much baggage that we're carrying on our back. So, so coming back to my point, technology is an enabler. Definitely, it offers therapeutic solutions. So I was looking at Krista's solutions and I was like, wow, this transports me to a different part of the world just by looking at it. And it helps me give that time and space to reflect on, how am I feeling? Who am I? What do I want? And at the very same time, I think one thing which I learned because I was working with these HR employee engagement teams was how data and analytics plays an important role now. So the way we have, our fitness trackers tracking how many steps a day we are walking, can it also help us determine how we are feeling, right? And how can workplaces actually use these insights to understand, oh, are my employees feeling stressed right now? How am I? What is the general temperament of the room of the workplace? And I think that needs to go back feeding into the decision making. So that's how I perceive that we need to make sure that everything that we create has to center around agency. And also, I think we need to also, make sure that it has to be tailored for different diversity of people that we have on the group, including the neurodivergent talent. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
And I love all of these points that you all brought up because one thing that I want to emphasize here is that this is not some issue that we're talking about as if it's a new issue. We know that globally, 1 trillion US dollars are lost due to lost productivity from anxiety and depression alone every year. $1 trillion. And in fact, recent studies have shown that 80% of young people would prefer and will move to a different job that has better mental health services and offerings. And so this is something that is not only socially the right thing to talk about, it's economically the right thing to talk about. And one thing I hear a lot is, this top-down approach, where it's not just about bringing solutions to the workforce from the ground up, but making sure that the leadership reflects those values to make sure it's okay for people to feel safe in that space. And perhaps one thing I wanted to mention before we go on to our next question would be that one way I've seen a lot of companies start to do this is by offering therapy programs as part of their healthcare packages, which is fantastic, but perhaps it's not the only solution they should be focusing on, especially because that can be a reactive approach rather than a proactive one. And perhaps CBT, the primary form of therapy usually offered in these cases, might not be the best fit for every single person out there. And so that leads me to my next question. Since we're talking about best fits for people, it requires a culture of trust for people to feel like they can share these parts of themselves in the workplace in the first place. How might organizations foster that culture of trust to bridge the gap between executive confidence and employee sentiment on workplace inclusion, especially concerning mental health challenges? Anyone want to start?
The stigma of the conversation of mental health has to be dispelled, and there has to be actual, humanity in the conversations between people. I think that it comes from the management level because once you feel safe and once you feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to be singled out or judged, I'm not going to lose my job. If I start saying, oh, my mother passed away, or, I had some issues at home, and, everybody has challenges in their lives. And I think that compassion that is brought in from the management level can actually allow employees to build trust, because among the employees, they're of course going to create friendships and camaraderie and an open dialogue, but with the message from management from the top level saying it's okay, and we're here for you. We have these therapists that can provide you with support, whether it's in person or whether it's online. And here are some tools that we can offer you as well. Breathing exercises. We have some psychoeducation. Psychoeducation courses are incredible because maybe there are some people who have awkward social skills in the company with autism. The neurodiverse community needs, help in how to communicate with their fellow employees who are neurodivergent, and vice versa. Acceptance and compassion.
Maybe showing some ideas and building on how do we build this culture of trust? How do you actually get a large organization, 50, 60,000 employees globally, to take that first step? I think fundamentally it starts with bringing two worlds together. On one side, there's the organizational health part, and that has to have psychological safety at the core, with leaders acting those values. But on the other side, you need employee care. And that's where the concepts like psychoeducation, access to therapy, and many other things play a huge part. Without doing both at the same time, these initiatives are doomed to fail. We can have unlimited therapy and the best psychoeducation tools if you're working unlimited hours in a toxic environment where your boss is constantly micromanaging you. Therapy will not be effective. Similarly, you can be in a great environment but be struggling with something at home. If you have no confidential pathway to get support to live through that, you will not be happy at work. So we need to do these two things together. Now, fundamentally, what's stopping a lot of big companies from taking that first step is a myth that I think we need to dispel. It's the myth that by focusing and investing in mental health, we're taking away from the performance of our individuals. We're giving them an excuse to not perform because they now can pull the mental health card. And research has showed that's fundamentally wrong. I would even go beyond and make a bold statement that companies decide they want to be high performing when they invest in mental health. There's so much research that reinforces that argument, that shows the return on investment. There's been a lot of discussion this week as well about that. there's a total return to shareholder premium. I'm not giving trading advice, but that's actually an interesting study. There's a total return to shareholder premium for companies who are part of the well-being index, and they typically overperform the S&P 500 by 20 to 30%. Right? So it does pay off, but we have to make that first step, and to make that first step, we have to understand that it does not take away from performance, it enables performance and productivity.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Because, the toxic boss, narcissism in the workforce is extremely, it must be awful, to have a terrible boss who targets you or belittles you, diminishes who you are every day. How can you avoid that? And is it possible to have this feedback loop where the employees can give their feedback on their boss and the boss has a coach? And so there's a dynamic way of building trust through, okay, the boss can do better in these emotional EQ levels, and how can you be a better manager? And let's be open about that instead of being an egotistical maniac, right?
Yeah, ecosystem versus ecosystem.
Yes.
Yeah. Prabhu?
Yes. I think from my perspective, one question that we need to ask is, are our leaders really prepared? Do they also have the self-awareness? Because if you're not truly self-aware about yourself, it's very tough to expect a person in that responsibility to take care of the entire organization. So I think that's something that I deeply feel. To the toxic boss point that you said, I unfortunately had a toxic boss. Um,
We all have.
we all have. Unfortunately, my colleagues say nowadays it's tough to find a boss who's not a toxic. I don't know how true is that, but uh, and initially I had a lot of resentment. I was like, why is this person being like this with me? Um, and I remembered that this one time I was just sitting and I just reached out and and we just started talking, and I started just asking him questions. How are things outside your work? And I don't know why. I think he was just waiting for someone to ask how's he feeling, right? And he just went all over. And I think that conversation made me realize, uh, while we expect a lot from the leadership, I think they're also humans and they also need support. That conversation, I'm not sure if that my boss became not toxic after that though, but it definitely helped us bridge. So I feel that and that was very powerful for me. I was like, because we always expect top down that oh, whatever my leader, my manager, or my boss is gonna say is gonna be right. I need to follow. No, they also need that support from us. So I think that really builds trust, because when you give that opportunity to someone who's in a senior position to you to also be vulnerable, and then you're in a position to also make them feel comfortable, I think that was wow for me. So I think when I say dialogue, it's not just about talking strategy, talking, the glossary of mental health. I think it's about also giving opportunity to talk about who we are, how we are feeling outside our work masks. So that's how I perceive build trust. Now, scalability is definitely going to be an issue because in big organizations, you can't do this with like everyone though, but it has to come at every level. And interestingly, what happened is one of my job was about curating employee engagement programs for global organizations, and I often used to interact with the learning and development teams of these companies. And they always used to say, "Oh, we are doing a program. We want to bring data analytics skills. We want to talk about AI. We want to." Oh, at Max, they said we want to make sure there's leadership skills given to. But why is L&D not talking about self-awareness? It needs to be in the entire structure of our learning and development ecosystem as well, right, within the organization. So I would love to see that. I think because that makes people introduced to the topic, and then you're in a position to also have that kind of navigation and connection with someone. And I think once you really do that, when you touch, move, and inspire someone, I think that's how I see trust building. So yeah.
I love that. And I think maybe a key way we could think about how we can implement that level of self-awareness is to look around who is leading the organization. If everyone looks the same in the top leadership, but maybe the employees don't quite look like that, it's going to be very hard for the employee to feel like maybe I can give some sort of feedback that can lead to self-awareness in that top leadership. So this is yet another case for a lot of inclusivity in the way that we have those top-down conversations to encourage each other from that chief executive level. Which brings me to my next question as we talk about executives. So how can executive leadership actively engage with employees to better understand their concerns regarding workplace inclusion, especially in relation to mental health, and translate this understanding into meaningful actions? Vlad, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. And look, in many ways, I think it starts with the word that was already mentioned, which is vulnerability. I think as long as we have, that mask on and we show up in a perfectly lit room with a perfectly written script and we talk about next year's performance goals and all of that stuff, people don't deeply connect with that at a human level. Right? We're going to sort of take it and put it in one part of our brain and then feel like now we have to go and get all that stuff done. But I think fundamentally when a leader, a senior leader, opens up about their own lived experience, be it with challenges at work, be it with conflict, be it with their own doubts, that's when we really connect with that person, way beyond what they're saying, but also with what they're feeling. And I think we haven't reached that level of emotional maturity, comfort, vulnerability for most leaders where they can share that part of themselves yet. But when they do, it's really powerful. And I've seen this happening firsthand when we first launched the mental health initiative in my former company. It really took off like wildfire when a very senior leader who was really perceived as a superman, right? It was a legend in the organization. Came up and opened about his own struggles with mental health. He had written a Financial Times op-ed about it, so he was open to really discussing it in great detail. And I was leading the mental health initiative at the time, and my phone started ringing like crazy, you know? All of a sudden, we could talk about these things. It's not something that's gonna, put your career at risk or single you out from your promotion. It's something that you can actively engage on and address, right? But unless we're willing to have leaders who share that part of themselves without us penalizing them for doing so, we're not going to get to that level of commitment and that level of discussion that we really need to engage with young people on this topic.
And I think that's so important because so often we hear people say that, well, if I were to talk about these things, what does that mean? Does that emasculate me? Does that mean that I'm coming across as insecure in myself? But I think it requires the most security in yourself to know that you can embrace all these parts of you, including your emotional vulnerability, and still know that you can perform well because of this part of you that you're fully able to bring to the workplace. And so maybe Prabhu, do you want to contribute to this question?
Sure. I think we need to move the narrative to that mental awareness is a strength. Sorry, self-awareness is a strength. Very often, people in responsibility feel that, oh, if I become vulnerable, will it make me look weak? And if I make look weak, will that give confidence to my team? Will they look up to me or not? I think that puts a lot of leaders to hesitate, and I've seen that firsthand. But as long as actions are concerned, I think my thoughts are that when it comes to mental well-being, it's not just the job of the HR or the talent team or the L&D team. Leadership needs to be hands-on involved in that process. Now, it's okay that in position of responsibility you may not have a lot. You may not have a lot of time, but even if you take 10% of your time or even 5% of your time in a month and just be involved in the process, that is a lot because we are far away from there. At least to get started, we have to get somewhere. So I think that so when it comes to these discussions and dialogues, I think uh, leadership needs to actively be involved. That's one. Number two also is I personally feel the role of mentorship in an organization is not just limited to your professional goal or your technical skills. It's also about coaching people. So if once a leader has a basic level of self awareness and understanding, I think coaching really plays a good role. Even leaders need coaching, by the way. Uh, and I think that is a good way where it trickles down and you are able to kind of build that level of trust across the organization. And I think if and a lot has to do with organization values as well. Does the organization value really reflect that trust is important or not? That's a question. Everyone's trying to chase excellence in their values. Who's talking about trust? Who's talking about vulnerability? I think, and I think that's so. And in my workplace, I first felt that was missing. But I also know for a fact that a lot of leaders and organizations. In fact, I met two of the leaders at Davos who were talking to me about how they're coming here to learn perspective on how to build that level of self-awareness and take it back to their organization. So that means people are open to change. We need to take it to them. So that's one point that I want to make. Second point that I also want to add to this is the fact that this the once we need to take away the stigma. That's a big problem. If someone really goes through mental health challenge as a first person, we need to have a acceptance for lived experience, and b, it really becomes difficult for that person to get, as a person first, and it feels like, oh, how I won't be able to get back on track. So that person usually goes on in silo. And I think problem is if the leadership perceives that that is counterproductive, or that is not adding to the, like you were saying, taking away from the productivity, then it becomes really problematic. Then it becomes really difficult for a person to feel like, oh, how do I get back on the track? So I think that stigma needs to be taken away, and the way to do it is through coaching. And that coaching is not just for leaders; it has to come across at all levels, in some shape, form, and capacity. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Got it. And so, Krista, what do you think?
Oh my God, I'm listening to all these incredible ideas and I just had this brainwave. So, to scale these kinds of solutions, you can use AI. So, every person that works in a company can have a journal or speak to, and also speak to an AI like therapist, right? Someone, and in confidence can share what's troubling you right now, what's going on in your life. For example, you're a single mother. You need to be home by this hour, and there's all these things you're worrying about with your child, blah, blah, blah. That feedback goes into the system, and the system helps to create this, the schedule environment, work environment that supports the needs of the employee. And also schedules therapies and support programming, brings in the groups together that have a common issue. They can come together and support each other. AI can be a very powerful tool for getting the reconnaissance, creating the solutions, and then executing it on a mass scale, which is really great.
Krista, I think there's a great opportunity for us to work together.
Read more on his app.
You just described a part of our feature set, and I love it. You're thinking in the future, because you're.
It's my job.
Yeah, and there's just not enough therapists out there,
No,
right?
there aren't.
We live in a world where there's rural areas where there's one therapist for 100,000 people. We just, even if everybody wanted to go into coaching or therapy, they wouldn't be able to get that level of access. So AI plays a pivotal role in giving people who aren't in a crisis situation the right support they need to stay well, right?
May I add on what
Sure.
I've learned through my programming and the research I'm doing? Preventative is key. Preventative education, coping strategies, and understanding that you're not alone and being seen and being heard in a group context. You can come into the metaverse and as an avatar on your laptop or your phone, and you can have preventative measures so you don't feel lonely and you're not getting to that crisis period, right? Because the crisis occurs when you have the wrong habits, the wrong frame of mind that's repeating every day over time, that's compounding into a greater problem.
And you feel alone.
Correct. And loneliness is the major issue. And it's already been proven through Nature Scientific Journal that VR can actually reduce loneliness. And that's in science now.
I love
It's
that.
very helpful.
That's wonderful. As we talk about technology and access gap, I would love for us to consider and discuss how we can make these things more globally contextual. And the reason I say this is because, for example, that statistic you brought up about rural areas flat, we see that actually more than half of countries in the world have fewer than one psychology professional of any kind per 100,000 residents. For these countries, it's not just about the rural areas, it's the entire country. And with my work at Letters to Strangers, we directly serve over 500,000 youths in over 70 countries. And what we see is that there are cultural stigmas, religious stigmas, etc., that make it so that these traditional ways of offering support that we see, for example, whether that be certain types of therapy or even the very way that mental illness is diagnosed through the DSM, These are based on Western psychological concepts and may not reflect colonial realities and such. And so I really want us to maybe think about how can we use technology to really democratize this access while keeping in mind the global diversity that we have and how we can leverage indigenous and traditional healing methods as we move into this futuristic world.
The metaverse.
Mm.
So, the beauty of the metaverse is that you are actually erasing stigma and you can create standardized programming that are for everyone, that's universal, that speaks to a universal language no matter where you are in the world to give you basic and really sort of foundational mental health, right? How can you do conflict resolution? How can you do breathing exercises if you're stressed? You know, if someone, how to not to take things personally, how to meditate, how to have, you know, healthy relationships, interpersonal dynamics. This is all education. It's like going to school. And you can offer these programming in the metaverse in every language. AI is going to completely eradicate the language barrier between human beings. Going in the future, within 10 years, we're all going to be speaking to each other. And it's going to be incredibly enlightening and transcendent. A global culture that is, how would you say, the next level of human civilization on Earth. And so I actually am very, very hopeful that the metaverse will actually bring us together. And it'll act as a way for us to actually interact in a healthy way. Mental health across the board, understanding globally, not only the workplace, but as human beings on Earth.
Mm. So I just want to double check. Do we have time for a Q&A or should I move on? Yeah, we do. Okay. So right before we do that, does anyone else want to talk about this question?
I just have a very short point, which I think in order for us to conserve trust in mental health and well-being, we have to stay rooted in science. But science is incomplete. We always discover more things. And we know that scientific research is extremely biased for the habits of the Western world. It's, you know, every clinical trial being run is also biased, right? So I think we need investment in expanding our scientific knowledge of what works in terms of mental health for different cultures, for different employee subsets, for different patient types. And I think we have a huge lack of investment. The current economic situation doesn't help. There's a lot of institutions who are actually going back or taking back their investment, including organizations. And I think for us to continue to build trust and expand our scientific knowledge, we really need investment. And I think this is a place where the workplace can really take a first step and say, people spend a third of their life at work, a third of our employees are suffering with burnout, anxiety, and depression. We're gonna take a leadership role and invest in these tools, invest in expanding our knowledge so that we can create a place where people wanna spend their lives.
Yeah, just like investing in new tech for your workplace, you can invest in the well-being of your employees.
Exactly.
So I just want to touch upon one point, which is we're talking about technology. We need to also talk about accessibility.
Exactly.
I think you're right. A lot of new age technology that is being tried and tested is in a very different part of the world. But and also when we say mental well-being, it's not just limited to multinationals. It's not just limited to your top tier jobs and workspaces. We have to also include people who also are from blue collar jobs, who are also who may not who belong to the mid tier category as well, right? Because those are the spaces where no one's really thinking about is this technology really going to be accessible to them, right?
It's not a luxury.
Yes, 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 exactly. So yeah, so that's just one thought that always keeps in my mind is that I may have access to metaverse and it's exciting, but how do people in my office who are my support staff, security staff? Yes, exactly.
We all have this.
Yes, yes,
That's
yes.
it.
So
It's the first step.
yes, that's the first step, but the design has to be accessible. So that's just the accessibility part is something that really is I'm very curious about to see how it unfolds.
And so that is a great transition to a Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? I think we have a lot of wonderful nuggets that were discussed.
That I heard interesting keywords and actions that could be implemented. Keywords such as depression, and anxiety, keywords such as tools to access therapy. Now, a couple of comments. I would like to emphasize that brain and mental health goes very much close to each other together, that most of the brain and mental diseases impact women disproportionately than men, that we manifest different type of symptoms, we react differently to drugs, to treatment, but unfortunately clinical development and research did not prioritize this. So I would like first of all to ask you what you're doing at your level to mitigate this huge gap that exists in mental health and well-being for females specifically, but also what you are doing for preventative measures, because it's nice to have access to a psychotherapist. It is nice to have the trusted environment to open up. I think we are all responsible to prevent brain and mental issue. And we know that most of the brain and mental issues are, preventable by doing very simple things such as, sport or eating properly, moving, the fact that we sit all the time, that's a pandemic that impact our well-being more than smoking. Hair loss, we have, all these kind of things that can reduce the risk of developing dementias later on in life of 40%. So my two questions are, what are you doing to mitigate the female gap in brain and mental health, and what are you doing for specific measures needed for women? And the other thing it is, what are you doing for preventative measures rather than, for in therapy?
So, so basically, I strongly believe in the psychoeducation component. You're absolutely right. And you bring in, there are so many diverse groups that need help. Everybody needs help. Women need help, neurodiverse women need help, single mothers need help. There are all kinds of categories of help within each gender. And I think that delivering this kind of programming, well, definitely in the metaverse, it's accessible, it's affordable. We want it to be able to scale, to have access to your smartphones, through your browsers, to create community. And I think that definitely the preventative measures of education and life skills is definitely a good intervention.
Maybe I'll add a couple of things that we're doing with Kian Health with some of the large employers we work with. I think first, we ask a lot of questions over a long period of time, and we build a treasure chest of data. That includes both male and female. So we expand our understanding of what are the factors in the workplace that influence female mental health versus male mental health. And we know from research that 48% of women say work negatively affects their mental health versus only 40% of men. And now we can understand why. And that's really, really powerful. The second part is, in terms of prevention, the way we connect with psychoeducation tools can be very different, even if the voice is male versus female, right? If we have a visualization exercise and we're a woman who has lived through traumatic experiences in her past with a man, she's just not going to be able to disconnect when she's visualizing and hearing a male voice. So one of the things we do when we have hundreds of hours of visualization on our tools, people can select their voice. They can even record a specific voice from somebody they feel safe with in their family and have that voice guide them through their journey. So that's the type of personalization that we think is essential for prevention to work.
I just want to answer the second question as to what all preventive measures are we taking. I think in the Global Shapers community, mental health is extremely important topic. There are more than 50 hubs globally who have active projects on mental health. Mine is one of them. And I want to touch two notes here. One, you talked about how positive behavior leads to a preventive approach. So we have a project in our hub called Healthy Gurgaon. Just for some context, I live in a part of New Delhi where all the big multinational companies have their offices. That means a large part of young workforce. And what this also means is a big challenge which we don't see, but we can experience around ourselves, which is moving in a direction towards increased level of stress, anxiety, mental health challenges. Right, we are on that track if you're not guided. So what we're trying to do in Healthy Gurgaon is how do your lifestyle, how do your positive, habits really help you develop a lifestyle which kind of helps you, I would not say mitigate, but like kind of helps you prevent or maybe reduce the intensity of the kind of challenges that you might be on a track to experience, right? So that is there. And the second part is, in our community there are some people who have a better emotional EQ, who are slightly more self-aware. So we try to create a community, a cohort kind of a model where people also give psychosocial aid to, can give some sort of initial level of support. So because there was a big stigma when we were talking to people, people thought first level of mental health is go to therapy, which is not the case. You have to take a step back and see, we have to identify at an early stage, where is this my lifestyle, where my path is going to lead me to. So a cohort style of program is something that we're doing. Idea is very simple. Can you build a support system along with someone who just has accountability to each other and helps you keep in check to make sure that you follow, you're able to inculcate positive lifestyle behavior. That's one. Second is, during the COVID-19 pandemic, that is where I think all of us had an opportunity to realize, for the I mean, at least I, for the very first time, felt the intensity of how am I feeling, right? I mean, to be very honest, prior to that, even I personally did not really experience something which I could identify. Maybe I was not even aware back then. So we started a project called mental health for young professionals. Idea was simple. Idea was to help people understand what they're feeling is something which is absolutely okay, and help them identify, oh, am I feeling anxious? Am I, deep down in their feelings, right? And basically introduce them to very basic aspects of mental wellness. We don't want to complicate it at the very first stage, so we basic concepts. So these are some of the projects. There's a lot of research also that's going on in the Global Shapers community, where hubs are trying to understand the mental health and mental wellness perspective of vulnerable community, because no one's really talking about them. I know we're slightly digressing from the topic, but since you asked the question, I wanted to highlight. And I think in one of our upcoming Global Shapers analysis and global report, you will also see what these 10,000 global shapers around the world are talking about in terms of, perspectives on, mental wellness and also innovations. So yeah, so those are some of the initiatives that are already going. Uh, Time is short, otherwise I would have given like a lot of other good, really fantastic examples. But we're seeing a lot of innovation in our community as well,
Yeah, for
as
sure.
far as the preventive approach is concerned. So yeah.
I love that you gave these specific examples, because one thing that I really appreciate about your question is pointing out just how the different ways that we treat mental health differs. So what I mean is, okay, so for example, the term hysteria is derived from the same root word as people with uteruses. If you think hysterectomy, hysteria, they have the same root word. It was initially used to describe women. This is what I mean with the type of thing we're talking about here. There is such an ingrained linguistic level stigma that is falling through all of the different levels of an organization and culture, that I think when we take these approaches to tackle mental wellness, we have to also think about how can we approach it in a way that doesn't add to the stigma that already exists for people who are feeling very, very concerned about maybe potentially being identified as someone who is neurodivergent or has a mental illness. So one thing that we've done at Letters to Strangers, for example, is with some of our communities in Zimbabwe, we will host menstrual pad creation workshops, sewing workshops, where we're more likely to get folks to join. But then in between the workshop spaces, we have mental health workshops. So then we use what people are starting to be more interested in as a way to draw them into the conversation, to then adding piece by piece the mental health part as well. And that's is something I think is very scalable and translatable to many workplaces. So as we are running to the end of the session, I know there's so many wonderful thoughts going around here, and hopefully some people can stay behind and talk to each other about it. But I want to give the panelists a chance to maybe share their concluding thoughts, ideas, something you want to leave everyone in this room with to maybe act upon in this topic.
I'm happy to go first. I think we fundamentally need to switch the discourse from wellness, mental wellness, to mental well-being. I think mental wellness implies a state of feeling good for a while, like when we go to the spa or use a nice skin product. Those are wellness products. I think well-being means something we fundamentally embed and live in our daily life. And I think whether we're at work, whether we're at home, whether we're at events like this, we need to have space for well-being. And that has to start with self-awareness for us as individuals, but also for us as leaders of organizations. And then once we're able to communicate that self-awareness to others through vulnerability, we're also able to connect at a much deeper level with the people around us. And that's also when the tools, the systems, the metaverse as a really key to the future with AI can really start to deliver on their promise. But it has to start with embedding well-being in our daily life and building the self-awareness to act in a truthful way.
We have a real opportunity at this turning point of emerging technology to not only accelerate technology, because it's a huge explosion, but we have a responsibility to elevate human potential. So let's think outside the box. Let's approach emerging technology as a means to enhance people's well-being, health, wisdom, and to make people better.
Love that.
Yes. I'm going to repeat my line. I strongly believe technology is an enabler, not a replacement. A lot of us are thinking that there's going to be some solution, some platform, some application come in and voila, magic's going to happen. The thing is, what we're missing the point is we're missing human connection, and technology is going to facilitate that. Now that's going to be interesting. I am excited about the possibility. So when we talk about the future, we talk about I love mental well-being because that's extremely the important point that you raised. When you talk about this, we have to remember the point at the end, it all comes down to that human connection, and we should not lose the essence of it. Because then otherwise we'll miss the whole point. So that's all I feel otherwise. But I've enjoyed listening to both of your comments. I'm very excited about Metaverse to take me to some different part of the world,
Yes.
to give me time off from the reality around myself and to really give me opportunity to think who
Yes.
am I, how am I feeling.
And,
So,
and the
yeah.
power of immersive experiences powered by AI as a therapeutic tool and instrument is very, very exciting. It's a whole new realm of treatment.
And so if I have to summarize what I'm hearing, it's that together we have to be not just reactive to mental illness, but proactive about mental well-being.
Yes, so very good synthesis.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.